I think this is the critical issue in our country right now. As I go around door to door, I'm getting ready for a primary tomorrow. The last primaries of the year are in New York and Florida. And as I go around, and every intern I get for every campaign I've run, they always say, people seem really uninformed. And I was a journalist. I owned a newspaper. And now being a member of Congress, we are in a self-governing constitutional republic. And Lincoln once said, it's about self-governance. Can we govern ourselves? We're at that critical point, and I think we're here again, just like in the Civil War. We have people that look to government for everything instead of self-governance, which is what's preserved in our Constitution. So my mission is always to be as honest, as forthright, and as transparent as I can be. I explain every vote that I take in detail on the House floor, and I put it out every week. It's on all my social media platforms. Actually, the votes explanations are out within an hour of every vote. And that's why it's so important to have journalists who are looking to get the facts to all of us so that we can self-govern. Because if we don't, the bureaucrats in government are going to take over our lives. And that's what you're seeing under the Democrats. That's who you see them infiltrating, whether it's infiltrating the media, our schools, our colleges, big tech, everything, and why it's so important to have people out there like you are really willing to get down and dirty. I mean, literally getting into the dirt and finding and discovering what the truth is. And I think people are looking for that instead of these polished, talking heads on TV, just kind of telling people what they think they want to hear so that they can make money. And I think what worries me the most is I think the media knows, this legacy media, they know what they're putting out isn't truthful. And they're deliberately kind of callously and calculatedly exploiting people who don't know the facts. And that's where people don't know where to turn. So we look to people like you, and that's why I explain everything as much as I possibly can. I mean, I'm totally transparent. I have people from all around the country that actually look for my vote explanations as I travel around doing, election integrity to these groups, either by Zoom or in person. Everyone's like, oh, we're already following you on your site because we don't know where to turn. How Congress.gov is too complicated. Then we got to figure out the bill. And we know you're a Republican and we know you're going to explain it. And so we go right to your site. So I literally have thousands of people following my weekly newsletter just because they want to see how I'm voting and whether the Republicans are voting right or not. I think it's really a compliment to me, but I never realized it until I get on these Zoom calls. So that's my long hello.
Well, that's right. No. I'm glad you brought it up because, we always assume, I mean, I do sometimes too, without even thinking about it, that everybody's informed about this. No, not everybody is because the media is not doing their job anymore. And that is a real tragedy to our republic. And sometimes even when it comes to me, I'm like, don't you realize how many people are crossing the border? People will say, no, I had no idea. If they're not watching certain news channels, if they're not watching me on Fox News or watching Bill Maloogian or, getting their news from alternative media sites that are covering these issues, then they really have no clue as to what really is happening in our country. I mean, because I've seen that over and over again with, news sources that we used to trust. It was funny. I talked to people that have said, I've canceled my New York Times, I've canceled my New York Times. I want to say prescriptions. It's like it's a drug.
Yeah, well, it's the failing New York Times, remember?
It's the failing New York Times, and the Washington Post. And, they've canceled it. They've canceled those because they don't trust them anymore. And that's really sad. That's really sad that we've reached this point. And I believe, and I've always told young journalists who ask me these questions, when I used to be a hard-nosed print journalist, just like you. Now, of course, I have an opinion, but I will still investigate. And all my investigations are based on the facts that I collect through my investigations. But I tell people all the time, you are not going to be able to tell your audience the truth unless you yourself have gone to get that information and investigated it. You can't sit behind a desk and pretend to know everything.
No, you're right. And I have an opinion too. And when I ran our newspaper, look, I used to have a line between what was the editorial page and what was the news page, because you really have to, and you're not going to be perfect. But what really turned me off many years ago, the New York Times, is that I would look at just maybe 20 or 30 years ago when I first got out as a lawyer and started practicing law, I'm looking at the New York Times and say the Wall Street Journal side by side, the liberal newspaper, the conservative newspaper. All the articles in the New York Times on the news page were laden with political speak and political opinions. And it was like, this is supposed to be on the op-ed page. And that's one of the things I always liked kind of about the Wall Street Journals. They used to have that page down the side where you kind of just get the quick facts and then you could go in if you wanted to read more. And they tended to be more factual in their news section. I'm saying they're not perfect. They have an opinion. You have an opinion. But at least I used to try to put the news out. And to be honest with you, one of my reason I've had such a struggle and such an odyssey in politics as a Republican, even though I'm a conservative Republican, is when I had my newspaper in my region, the Republicans were in control and some of them were corrupt. And I called them out and they're like, oh, I can't believe you're doing that in your newspaper. But you have to do that. You have to go to the meetings and see the facts and tell the story.